Welcome to Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and today I am super enthusiastic to introduce you to Thomas. Thomas is a member of our community that shares a lot in common with everybody who is in our group. Thomas has been a successful entrepreneur in many different verticals, and we're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about how some decision led him into the crosshairs of the criminal justice system and what he is doing to self-advocate so that he can work toward the best possible outcome. So, Thomas, thanks so much for being a part of our community. And, we're a nonprofit. And I always make three promises to members of the nonprofit. And that's one, I'm never going to lie to anybody. I'm never going to ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. And three, nobody's going to have to pay a penny for any of the educational resources we give away on prisonprofessors.org. And I just want to start off by thanking you for volunteering with our community. Our mission is to try and improve outcomes for 1 million people. And now you're a part of that. So I really want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So could you tell our audience a little bit about the challenges that you're facing right now?
As a outcome of what I'm going through.
Yeah, what you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges, I think, initially are always kind of reputational. You spend your life building a reputation, and then you feel like that's kind of destroyed overnight, which can be, I guess, a blow to your ego, really. And I think it's how do you react to that, and how do you look to change that? So certainly your reputation is going to be impacted. Financially, you're impacted. What comes with a felony is your ability to vote. I mean, and there's a lot of liberties and things that are taken from you. So there are many challenges. I mean,
But when I say the challenges, I'm saying specifics. What is going on in your life? Like, are you facing a sentence? And when is it going to be carried out?
Yeah. So in 60 days, I'll report. The sentence is 12 months and a day. So that's what I'm looking at facing right now.
And how long has this been hanging over your head?
So I received a CID, an information demand for information from the government in 2018, and so this is going on 7 years of my life.
Is it a tax-related offense?
Then no, it's not. It's a healthcare fraud
Okay.
case. So.
And so you said it started in 2018. Does that mean in 2017 you thought it might be more likely that you would get leprosy than have a problem with the criminal justice system?
For sure. Never in my life did I imagine I'd be caught up in the criminal justice system, for sure.
And when you learned of it, I imagine that you hired counsel, and could you tell me a little bit about how your counsel prepared you for the journey ahead?
Yes, I did hire counsel. Immediately was a little bit, of course, shocked when you get a CID to say, wow, what is this about? Am I a target of this? What have I done? So voluntarily went, met with the government, kind of showed them who I was and tried to understand their case. At the time, they said, you're not a target. We just think you could be helpful in this case. That was in 2020. So it was 2 years after the CID that we actually went and talked to them. And then it was pretty much radio silence until 2022 when I was indicted.
So for those members of our community that might not know these acronyms of CID, I think you're talking about the Criminal Investigation Division. And when he used this term of a target, there's typically three categories. Being first, a witness to a criminal investigation, could be somebody who works in a company, but doesn't really know anything. Two, could be a subject of a criminal investigation where you might know something, but we don't not think you broke the law. And the third is a target. If you're a target, it typically leads to an investigation. And it sounds to me, Thomas, like you started off as a subject or a witness, but they went silent on you and then decided you are a target and didn't reach out further. They just indicted you. Is that right?
Correct. It came as a shock even to my attorney, who said, I don't, he's never had a case where he didn't get a warning that this was going to happen to a client. So it came as a shock, to all of us when the indictment came.
And that's probably a pretty good idea for anybody who's looking to our nonprofit for information on how to prepare. I think that you're going to find, I think that there's a lot of people whose attorneys will say, God, this has never happened before. I can't believe it. Right. And it's really important, I think, for anybody going into the system to recognize, in an era of big government where big investigations and a weaponized DOJ, anybody, they can get anybody. And you have to be thinking about how do you put yourself in the best possible position for the best possible outcome. When you got indicted, Thomas, were you were you thinking that the sanction ultimately could potentially be a year and a day, more or less, or a civil matter? What were you thinking?
No, I mean, I think I knew from the information given to me that it was a maximum 5-year sentence and a maximum $250,000 penalty or fine
Mhm.
for it. So that was kind of the information given to me.
So was a year and a day then considered, did you consider that a successful outcome given this is what happened?
I guess it could be. I mean, when I look at I chose to defend myself and go to trial. So people that pled guilty got $100 fine and 1 year probation. That was it. That are identical in my situation. So
I
it
see. So people who cooperated with the government, pleaded guilty, they ended up getting a non-incarcerative sentence and $100 fine. You, on the flip side, went to trial, and the judge imposed a 1-year term.
and a $25,000 fine.
And how long was the trial?
The trial was 7 weeks.
So maybe what would be helpful now is to get an understanding of what happened. Like what is the case about?
Yeah, so I was at the time a sales rep for a medical company, a laboratory company, and the I don't know how in depth you want to get, Michael, on this,
Oh,
but
I think what we're looking for is just put you. I mean, you're volunteering with a nonprofit to try and help as many people as possible. Think about the kind of information that would have been helpful to you in 2018. Okay. Like,
sure.
so that's kind of our mission, is
Yeah.
to help people work toward the best possible outcome. And sometimes they have a defense attorney who fights valiantly for them and really advises them well, and sometimes they don't. And so I think it's super important for people to hear uh, stories and strategies that have worked for other people, and let them take that into their calculus and figure out, what can I do?
Yep.
So yeah, please tell us whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And then what I'd like to do is get into your career, how you built a career, and then what can you do now going forward? Because now I want to make sure that you know what's coming, and you know what to do, and we build a lesson that can help hopefully a million other people figure it out as well. And that's the mission of our nonprofit, is to improve outcomes for people going into the system or at any stage of the system.
Got it. So, yeah, when the indictment came, of course, I told my attorney they had already taken my phone, my computer, and they had scrubbed everything. And I told my attorney, I don't believe I committed a crime. So I asked that you scrub it. If you see any evidence that I knowingly, willfully participated in a crime, I'll plead guilty because that would be the right thing to do. And my attorney said, I don't see any indication that you knew a crime was going on or that you were part of a conspiracy. So there were 18 people indicted, most of whom I didn't know. They were in distant parts of the state that I didn't know or work with. So before the trial, I went and proffered. I met with them again to try to really understand the case and see where do I fit into this scenario. And it really wasn't clear. And I asked in that meeting, what could I have done differently to not be in this position? And he said, you could have told on the people doing something wrong and stopped it. You didn't do that, which true. If I had known, I would have done that. I didn't know what these people were doing. So right before trial, they came to me literally days before trial and said, offered me a plea deal, and they said, you can name your felony, essentially. We'd rather you cooperate in this case. And so it was a really tough decision for me because it would have required me, of course, if you reach a deal, they want you to testify against other people. But it would have required me to be dishonest and say, well, I knew these people were committing crimes. I didn't know these other people. And these other people, eventually in the trial, didn't know who I was. And they testified that I wasn't part of their crime. And so it's been a trying, and I'm never an advocate for saying, oh, it's so unfair because life is just not fair. But it's been a difficult thing for me to really lean on faith and family to really understand. I don't know exactly how I got here or why this is happening, but I'm not going to let it be wasted on me. And that's really a lot of why I'm here with you because the criminal justice system needs reform, in my opinion, and I've been part of it, and I want to help other people navigate it in any aspect and whatever they decide to do. And I can tell you, when I went to my sentencing hearing, my attorney addressed the judge and the prosecutors and said, "I want to be clear that in this case, the crimes that were committed were in Houston and Dallas. Is anybody disputing that?" The judge and the prosecutor said no. The people who perpetrated the crimes testified they did not know my client and that he was not part of their crime. Is anybody um, disputing that? No. The FBI witness, the FBI investigator also testified he found no evidence that I was part of this crime. Is anybody disputing that? No. But nonetheless, a jury found me guilty. And so when the judge sentenced me, he said, "You were on the ground floor, you were a sales rep, and there were sales reps that committed this crime. You were in a great position to know what they were doing and to have stopped it, and you did not stop it. And for that reason, I'm sentencing you to 12 months and a day." So it's been, I mean, unfair. I mean, I don't know a better description for it. It has felt unfair. But nonetheless, it inspires me to want to fight for change, to want to say, how can we change this system where the people who committed the crime and pled guilty are home with their families? They're facing no time away from family. They were almost rewarded. And my attorney told the judge, if you're trying to dissuade people from committing a crime, and you look at the people who committed the crime and said I committed the crime, and they walk pretty much free, versus somebody who stood up for their rights and the truth goes to prison, it almost tells criminals commit a crime, but if you plead guilty, you have a better outcome than if you actually fight for what you believe is right. So it's a little bit of a long story. I don't know if it's going to be
Well,
useful.
well, I think we have to look at the system as it exists and not as we want it to be.
Right.
And you're looking for justice and some pathway that would reflect justice. But the system isn't. I think for people who are going through it, they should anticipate it's more about convictions and finality.
Yeah.
And the people who pleaded guilty, they got the result that the system wants. Process people swiftly, get a conviction, and move on. And that looks great on a stat sheet. Okay.
Right.
You chose to go to trial and put them to the test. So in if they're defining success as convictions rather than justice, you made it a little harder for them to get a conviction. And that's the reason, in my view, that you're getting a sentence. But are you advancing to the next stage of the judicial process of and going for an appeal, or are you just saying, okay, I'm sent? So you are appealing.
We are appealing for, I mean, I think the strongest case is there were 2 jury notes passed in our trial that said we're a hung jury, and the judge never notified us of that, which is a violation on his part. He's supposed to notify us. We're supposed to come in, convene, and typically you would give a Brady response, which tells the jury in a formal way, if that is what is on your heart, you don't need to change your heart just to fit in with the rest of the jurors. We never were notified that there were twice a note passed twice. The second time, again, we're still a hung jury. The judge says that he didn't speak to the jurors, but in some way he communicated to them, just keep trying. And so that's one thing that feels a little bit, I mean, our attorneys feel like there may have been an error made by the judge. So that,
So that error is going to be subject to the interpretation of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
right.
And it, again, conviction, justice, finality. Was it harmless error? I mean, there's like 300 ways they can skin a cat and get the result that they want. A lot of times, there's just a conviction. Let me ask you a couple of other questions to the extent that you're free to talk about it. The cost of going to trial versus taking a deal and then going through an appeal. Like, what would you estimate, to the extent you're willing to give it to our audience? How much did this cost you in just legal fees so far?
Well, well, I was blessed because I worked for a corporation and one of the executives was charged that I was able to utilize their insurance. And
So
so,
you had O&D insurance.
but I do know it's been about $5 million for me alone to fight
Okay.
the case.
So the costs are expensive financially, but also in terms of mental health and probably in many ways earning capacity and so on and so forth. And then long term, as you started with reputational damage. So So now we've got a good idea of what you've gone through and what your family has gone through, but we will all have to live in the world as it exists and
Correct.
not
Right.
as we want it to be.
Right.
And we've got to deal. Hopefully, the Fifth Circuit brings some justice and reverses your conviction. But in all reality, with a sentence of a year and a day, there's a good chance you'll be home before you get that
Right.
result.
Right.
The question is, what happens with a sentence of a year and a day? And earlier, where I asked you, do you know what it means? You remember I asked you that question?
Right.
So I think if people are going into the system, they need to be thinking about all of these factors. We can't change the fact that you've gone through the judicial process and there's a verdict. We can't change the fact that the jury got it wrong. We can't change the fact that a judge sentenced you to a sentence of a year and a day. But I'm wondering if you and I would have spoken in 2018, okay, and I would have told you, look, Thomas, you don't have to cooperate against anybody. You could just say, "I'll accept responsibility, and I'll just at this whole process explain I didn't understand it, but I maybe I had a duty and a responsibility to learn, and in that instance, I failed. And let's just see what I could do to move forward." And that path, had you taken that path, I suspect you also would have gotten a non-incarcerated sentence and probably saved yourself, if not money, because the O&D insurance covered it, certainly some mental health complications. But we can't do that now. And I don't even know whether you would have done it. I don't even know. I don't know. What I do know is that right now, you have a sentence of a year and a day. And if we look at this as a letter grade, an F means you're going to serve a year and a day. That's
Right.
a failure. That
Right.
means you got everything went wrong, just as it seems everything has gone wrong so far.
Right.
Okay? I mean, you paid a lot of money. This has been hanging over your head since 2018, but you're not going to get an F. You're going to, we want you to be in a position of getting an A. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you have to understand, what does a year and a day mean? The advantage of having a year and a day versus a year is that the law holds that if you have longer than 1 year, you get statutory good time. And that's going to result in about 2 months coming off your sentence just for staying out of trouble. They call it good time, but it's really the avoidance of bad time because you don't have to do anything to get it. You just don't get in trouble. And so you'll get that time off. So you could take that year basically and cut it off by 2 months. And that takes you to 10 months. And I would say that's a D. If you have to do 10 months in prison, that's a D. You don't want to get a D. Then you're going to say you're also, because it's a healthcare crime and there's no violence, you're going to qualify for what's called the earned time credits under the First Step Act. And during your first 6 months, you're going to get 10 days every month that you serve. So in 6 months, you'll get 60 days off, which effectively reduces it by 2 more months. So now we could say a C is about 8 months. Okay. But you have to serve the 6 months in order to get the 8 months, because you only get the 10 days after you've done the month
Right.
or 2 months. Right. So that's why I say an A would probably be 5 to 6 months. That'd be an A. Okay. A B would probably be 6 to 8 months. So you want to position yourself to get an A. And then you want to do more than that, because if let's just say you do 5 or 6 months, you still owe to the Bureau of Prisons the full 8. So you want to have a high level of liberty while you're home, and that will depend upon your ability to self-advocate. And so and volunteering with our nonprofit, that's what I'm hoping we're going to do, is we're going to create a body of work that you're going to show the reasons why you're a great candidate for the best possible outcome at every stage. Not only transitioning to home confinement at the earliest possible time, that's step one. But step two, you want to make sure that you have the highest level of liberty when you transition out, and they're not giving you an orange vest and telling you to go pick up garbage on the freeway.
Right.
And then three, you've got supervised release. You want to put yourself in a position that the judge, because the judge is the only one who can do it under the law today, to grant early termination of that supervised release. And you need to build a record that shows why. We're going to use this lesson to help people in prison and help people who just are visitors to our nonprofit's website understand how to start thinking deliberately and proactively to build a body of work that they may use to self-advocate. Because although attorneys can fight valiantly for a best outcome, at the end of the day, I always say there's nobody more important than the individual. At least that's what I learned while going through prison for a quarter century, is that you've got to understand the stakeholders and understand what can you do to move the needle at every stage. We've already missed the stage of influencing the sentencing hearing. So we're positioning now for the administrative relief in prison, and then the liberty on the other side of prison. And then the next time you're going to ask the judge for relief, which would be early termination of supervised release. And that's what I want to do today. And I'll start by asking you a question. Do you have an idea of what that means? Like, what assets can you build to demonstrate you're a great candidate for an A?
I mean, I think it's working on your release plan and doing the steps, putting in the work and showing what are you doing to stand out, to better yourself, to help others. I think there's all those pieces feed into that. So,
So let's talk about a release plan then to start, because a release plan is a great start, and it is a start that you have to know how to use. And a release plan is not static. It's got to be dynamic, right? You have to start with a release plan because you're initially going to start with a stakeholder who's very cynical. That's going to be a case manager in the Bureau of Prisons.
right.
You're going to get in there, and a lot of people who work as case managers in the Bureau of Prisons, they believe if a judge sentenced you to a year and a day, well, you should serve a year and a day, okay? Because a federal judge thought so, and I'm not going to second guess a federal judge. And so they'll operate from that very conservative mindset unless you have built a body of work that shows why you're a better candidate for relief. And although I'm very optimistic that under this administration, we're going to see more changes that help people who help themselves, as of today, we're still dealing with the huge bureaucracy of people that are interested in the institution and not the individual.
Right.
So the release plan is a start, but the Bureau of Prisons is a very iterative process, and you've got to demonstrate all the different things that you are doing all the time. And I want to ask you some questions about your real career. So I know that you got in trouble, but what you did to get in trouble, really you did not without any intentional decisions. But what other decisions have you made? Like, tell me about your career, because I want to take your career and then show you how you could turn that into an asset that relates to exactly what we teach at Prison Professors. So could you tell me a little bit about your work history and your career?
Yeah. I mean, I always joke grew up in I guess, a broken home, single mother. We didn't have a lot of income. And so I started mowing yards. I always joke that was my first career, as I was mowing yards in the neighborhood because I wanted things like a Walkman radio or a Casio watch. There were these little things that in the 80s I wanted and we couldn't afford. And so I started mowing and I
Oh,
did
where was that, Thomas? Was that in Texas?
in Texas. Yeah.
Okay. So start off at what, 12 or 15,
At
13?
10 years old, I started pushing a mower and I built up clients because I was a little bit particular. I wanted yards to look really nice. And my grandfather told me once, every job you do, that's your name on that job. So if you leave grass sticking up or if you cut corners in a yard, that's your name and people know that's your name. And so I had this sense that I have to do a really great job. And so I kept building up clients and I mowed yards through college. And that was
Oh,
kind of about
wow. So started at 10 and then built a landscaping business that lasted all the way through college?
I continued to do it as weekends and maintain clients through college. I got other jobs. So I also worked at a golf course. And so I was really focused on just working hard. But I always say my career started in the landscape business. I still love landscape business. I I got an irrigator's license. I did a lot in the landscape business. I learned Spanish just to kind of communicate with my coworkers and really do the best job that I could in that business. So
Could I ask what kind of student you were? And so if you started working at 10, how did that influence your commitment to education?
yeah, I did. I mean, I do have some learning disabilities, and so I was actually told by a school counselor in 3rd grade that I was borderline mentally retarded and that I should
What a great teacher.
they told my mom
Has our job in the Bureau of Prisons, I'll tell you that.
they told my mom I should never be expected to go to college and never be more than a C student, but the more work I did, the more I had to manage time, and so I was an AB student. I mean, I made National Honor Society, Spanish Honor Society, Society of English Scholars in high school by working hard, but I really had to manage my time. So I would go to school, I would go to work. I worked every day of the week except Mondays. I worked on the weekends and then I did my homework. I got into college. I put myself through college. I put myself through grad school, and I've always had at least 2 jobs to kind of push that through and defy the odds, so to speak, or prove them all wrong. So
So that was an important goal, is to prove people who said you couldn't do something to do it.
right.
And then let's continue. When you were in high school, did you aspire then to go to college? Because he told you that so you said, "I'm going to college."
For sure. Yeah,
O
I mean, being told I couldn't do it, it made me want to do it even more.
And
So,
could you tell me what if you had, an idea of what you wanted to study in college or what you wanted to ultimately do for a living, or were you, interested just in furthering your landscaping career?
yeah, it's interesting. I learned about industrial psychology in high school, which is what I got a master's degree in. So
Could you
it's
tell us, our audience, what does industrial psychology mean?
yeah, people tend to think when they hear psychology that it's therapy and counseling, but industrial psychology is understanding the human mind and what motivates people to perform and how you train, educate, and motivate people through a career. And so that's what I got a master's degree in. Yeah.
Okay. And, did you ever work in that discipline of industrial psychology?
I did. I started off in that discipline with some companies and with the industrial psychology started at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio, which is where I lived. And so I worked at Brooks and with some professors in the military and published a paper. I did work in that field before I had branched off into sales and kind of entrepreneurship.
Okay. So when did you do that? When did you branch off? Like, how old were you? Give us, like, a timeline. You graduated with your, master's degree in what year?
1998.
And, so we're now in 2025, so 27 years. Give us an idea of the businesses. You said entrepreneur and sales, so give us an idea of the trajectory.
Yes, I worked for about 2 years in industrial psychology, and really it was so clerical and office job minded that it didn't suit my brain, I guess. So I got into sales. I didn't know anything about sales. I'm not a traditional salesperson because I'm a little bit quiet and reserved. I'm an observer, but I think I used maybe psychology to really understand kind of, as you said earlier, the stakeholders. And so who were my clients and what mattered to them. And so I approached sales in a very different way. And my clients would tell me that you really get to know me and what I need instead of forcing something on me that I don't know if I need. And so I started off in sales. And then I'd mentioned to you, I bought my first house and it had a shifty foundation. The soil was shifting. It was causing cracks and windows not open and doors would jam. And I met with an engineer to see how to fix my slab, and he said, "You don't technically need a slab repair. You need to hydrate around your foundation." And so that it led me down a path to develop my own hydration system that plugged into my irrigation system with moisture sensors and all these different things, and it worked. And so the engineer said, "You need to make a business out of this. Create a flyer, get an LLC, start a business because I could refer you clients all day long." And so that I did that on the side. Like I said, I've always had 2 jobs. So I was in
Was that proprietary? Like, what you built, did you have a patent on it?
I didn't I mean, I maybe could have, but it was more of a design. So I was using patented products in the irrigation supplies and the things that I used to build it. I just kind of brought them together into one product that probably was too young and not wise enough to think about patenting it. But I was the only person doing it. And so there
And
was
what was the could you help us understand, like, what was the, deliverable, the cost of what you delivered? What was a typical sale?
it was probably about $3,000, back in the 90s, fairly
A
expensive.
and you were basically a contractor then that the homeowner would say, "We need this service," and you'd it's gonna cost you 3 grand, and you'd send your team out there and they'd put it in?
Well, the engineers became my referral source. So they would look at houses every day, people that are concerned about their foundation, and a foundation repair could be tens of thousands of dollars. And so if it was really not that severe, it could be done with a measured, delivered hydration, then these engineers would just give them my name and there was nobody else doing it. And so I had crews and we would go out there, we would dig a trench. I mean, we put a weed barrier, we put pebbles, we put the tubing. I mean, it was a process in the way we did it and designed it and delivered it
Mhm.
for houses.
And how did that business grow? Like, what kind of revenues did you ultimately get?
It grew quickly. So because we were tapping, I had to go get an irrigator's license, which I always joke I was the only master degree irrigator in the state of Texas. It was a very difficult exam, but I went and passed the test. Because I was tapping into high irrigation, I had to have that license. In that process, landscape architects started hearing about our irrigation and that we could do that. And so we branched into full landscape. I mean, we were doing everything around the home with our crews, and it grew very quickly, and we wound up selling the company.
To whom? To a, another contractor or what?
Another contractor wanted the business and bought the business, and so
How long did you operate the business?
for several years, and at the same time, I was managing sales, which gave me the flexibility to kinda touch and go. In sales, you're out on the road, and so you don't have an office to be in,
Okay.
but it was a lot to juggle, and if anybody's ever dealt in the labor force, laborers, if they get once they get paid, they tend to not show up for a few days, so there was a lot of headache in managing the labor force in that manual labor kind of setting that it made it more attractive to sell it off to somebody so that I could focus on more of a corporate life and sales. So,
And did you'd mentioned that you sold the business, I would imagine that you did, and you said you'd concentrate on getting ready to sell the business. Did that require you to build a, maybe a set of books and getting your books ready so they could see what your sales are, what your assets are, or your capital equipment and the quality of your customers? Could you tell us about that process of selling a business?
yeah, I had a very good friend who was a CPA who I always had managed the books. I knew that accounting was not my forte, so I didn't want to venture into managing the books. So I had somebody doing that provided the profit and loss statements and kind of tracked the whole business from the book's perspective to make it easier to provide that information on a sale.
And when you came to a price for the business, was that based on a multiple of revenues or a multiple of of earnings? How did you price it?
Yeah, at the time it was looking at a projection of sales. I've learned a lot since I mean, I was in my 20s still back then. So if I had known now if I knew then what I know now, I'd have probably been a little more aggressive in what I asked for the business. But um, yeah, I've gone on to sell other businesses where you look at revenues and you look at a projection and you put a multiplier on there and kind of maximize the value of what you've built. So.
So the reason I asked all of those questions is because it's going to be part of the lesson that we're going to build for members of our community. Now, most members of our community have already gone through this course called Preparing for Success After Prison, and it's a 10-part course. And I'm gonna take what I just learned from you, because in the course, I always say, I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. I listen to leaders who've built something, and I did that while I was in prison. And you'll see that I'm always trying to learn. But then I'm hoping this isn't about me, and it's really not about Thomas. It's about you. If you're going through this course, you have to be the CEO of your life. You have to design and architect a strategy that's going to get you the outcome that you want. And I'm going to show you how I learned that, first of all, from Thomas. And after I deliver that 10 module course based on Thomas's story, what everybody just heard from Thomas, I'm going to start architecting or show him how to architect a strategy that will put him in a better position to get an A. An A is the earliest possible release date, the highest level of liberty, and the best possibility of getting early termination. That's how I would define success, and that is the first module of this of our course. For those of you who have already gone through the basic courses, and Thomas, I want you to kind of listen to this as we go, because it's what we're going to work on together when we write the lesson plan. The first module in our course is just that. It's defining success. And if you've been listening to Thomas as I have, you know that's something that he did intuitively when he was 10 years old. What did he tell us? I wanted to get a Casio watch and some of the cool things that other kids had, but we couldn't afford. So he said success for him is going to figure out, how do I earn an income to get there? That's your challenge. If you're going through a struggle or a crisis right now, what is success for you? Given where you are, assess the world as it exists. Okay, I'm in here. What can I do? In Thomas's case, it was, I want to have some cool shit. I don't have it. So I'm going to figure out how to get it. That leads to module 2. You've got to set very clear goals. And those goals have to align with how you define success. What did Thomas tell us about that? He figured out how to go and get jobs, mowing lawns, earning a living, and letting those earnings grow by getting more customers, and it carried him all the way through college. We could also hear about that in the next phase of his life when he built the first business that he sold. But let's just use the earlier story and then apply that to your life. If you know what success looks like, do you have a plan to go out there and get it? That's super important. That's what Thomas understood how to do, which is why I consider him a master of this pathway to being a CEO of your life. 3, you can know what defined success sounds like. You can set goals, but 3, you also have to have the right attitude. You have to do it not only for what's going to happen, but because you're deeply committed to it. And what did Thomas tell us about that? Well, his grandfather told him that your work is a reflection of your name. And so he said, I wanted to make sure there were no weeds on the grass. I did everything I could to be the best in the world at my chosen vocation. Do you have the right attitude? That's what you will have learned if you've really mastered module 3. I didn't come up with it. I learned it from listening to masters. 4, you've got to aspire to something more than what you're going through right now. Right now, you might be standing up for count, but you've got to see yourself as doing something else. And what did we learn from Thomas about aspiring to something else? As a 3rd grader, he was our great educational leaders and teachers told me, you'll never amount to anything more than a C student. Never get to college. Okay? Borderline retarded. But he didn't accept that. He aspired to be something else. What do you aspire to become? That's what's in module 4. And that's what Thomas did, which was why I consider him a master. 5, none of it matters if you don't take action. I asked Thomas, what kind of student were you? What did he say? I was an A and a B student because they told me I couldn't do it. So I took action. I studied. I worked hard. I solicited clients. I hired people. I trained them on what to do. All through this, I am learning. So it's those incremental action steps that puts a person on a position, on a pathway or trajectory to success. I frequently heard, success is 80% of success is just showing up and just doing, being there. And that sounds like what Thomas has been doing his entire life. You could just say, well, I'm just avoiding problems in prison and, that's not enough. You got to do more. Okay. And that's why I think we're talking with somebody who's been successful in this area. The next module in the course, module number 6, is you got to create accountability metrics. Great leaders say if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And we heard that in Thomas's story about how many people he went out and kept getting clients and growing and training people and doing things. And I'm going to guess that all of that work with dirt and landscaping and grass probably advanced his ability to succeed in that irrigation business that he built because he had experience that other people don't have. And he had experience academically as well, having earned a master's degree in a different course. I would imagine that training in industrial psychology, although he did describe himself as not being a sales professional, I think by holding himself accountable and pushing him through all of that advanced training probably is a reason that he became successful in the other entrepreneurial ventures that he launched. What are you doing to hold yourself accountable? The next module in our course is about awareness. You got to keep your head in the game at all times. You got to know what opportunities are around you. Every other 10-year-old kid could have been competing with Thomas and starting a lawn mowing business or pursuing academic goals or launching entrepreneurial ventures, right? But they didn't all have their head in the game. Okay? And because Thomas kept his head in the game, it sounds like other people became aware of him and they were willing to work with him and grow with him. The engineer became a feeder for his business because they were aware, wow, here's an innovative guy who came up with a solution to a problem and we want to help him grow his business. So think about that. How are you keeping your head in the game, not only being aware of opportunities, but making other people aware of you as well? The next module in our course is about being authentic. You got to be for real. You can't talk about wanting to get into college. You got to do the work. All right. To be authentic, you've got to have a plan. You got to know how to prioritize events. You got to build your tools, tactics, and resources that are going to help you succeed. And we're going to talk about that after I give the summary. And then you've got to execute the plan, making adjustments as necessary. But we always have to live in the world as it exists. And that requires us to be authentic. Number 9 is you got to celebrate every achievement, no matter how small it is. Thomas got his first job and then his second job and then his third job. And eventually he hired people and he put them into the role. He did this in business. He said that he sold his business and built multiple businesses and learned a lot along the way. All of that is incremental progress. So you've got to celebrate every little achievement as you're moving along the line. And the last module is number 10, and that's appreciation and living in gratitude. And I'm super grateful that Thomas has agreed to volunteer with our nonprofit so that we could share more courses with other people in prison. Would you say that was a fairly accurate a summary of what we learned from you today?
Yes, it was impressive. I was wondering if you have AI summarizing that or
Yeah, all in my head.
how'd you pull that off so quickly? It was very
Because I
succinct.
listened, and that's really what I'm going to ask you to do next as we go into the next phase of this lesson plan. Because that's what we have to do, Thomas. If we're going to change America's prison system and open more opportunities for people to earn freedom and work towards higher level of liberties through merit rather than waiting for 6 calendar pages to turn, okay? I know 7 months doesn't do anything. The question that we need to be answering is how are we going to make sure more people come out of prison successfully? And I know that you're going to come out successfully because you're super smart, super accomplished, and you know how to do it intuitively. That's not your challenge. Your challenge is going to be persuading very cynical people that you are the best candidate for relief. And that's what I want to show you by sharing my screen. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now and see if you have you ever seen, can you see my screen right now?
I still see you, but yes.
You still see me. So I was trying to share my screen. Let's see here. You see my screen right now that I'm sharing my screen?
Prison professor's talent.
Great. Have you ever seen this before?
Yes.
Okay. This is going to be a tool that I want you to become like an ambassador of this tool. Okay. And this is a tool that we could use to build a pathway that memorialize all the things that you are doing, right? We have this thing here on our website at the impact page, but this would show all the different institutions where our stuff is being shared around the country. In fact, I can go to prisonprofessors.org. So if I go here to courses, go to talent, click on that. I think it said read our impact. Let's see if it shows up there. Yeah, it does. So, how many students are enrolled and building their profiles and publishing their work and all this kind of information? This is supposed to be a dynamic feed, but what I'm trying to show you is that we try to get these courses all over the country. These are all the places where these courses are going. Okay. So the one thing that everybody in every one of these facilities has in common is they all want to get out of prison. Okay. But getting out of prison is only part of it. They also have to be working to make sure that they're successful when they come out of prison. And to do that, I want everybody to build I always like to show Chun Yang. So in our prison versus talent, we create these opportunities for people to memorialize their journey, meaning they should build a biography. Like everybody should build a biography so that they're not defined by what the government says at the worst time in their life, when a person is a convicted felon, whether a person is arguing for liberty or not. And every time somebody does that, they're advancing the ball of self advocacy because they're trying to supplement the record with something other than what the government said. And I don't think that that should be something somebody does one time. This is an iterative approach. Now, you're going to be home in a relatively short time. I would say definitely within 6 months of you going in there. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about that meeting you're going to have with a probation case manager in the halfway house, because that's who oversees home confinement. And you want to be able to point, look at how hard I have worked. And so my recommendation would be that you put a biography together now and build your prison investors talent profile that says, because you don't want to compromise your appeal. So you might write something along these lines. And I'm just going to dictate it right now. What would a biography sound like? My name is Thomas, and I know that a jury has convicted me of violating this particular crime, but I'm going to be honest, I don't never knew I was violating the law. And that's why I proceeded through trial. I respect the jury's verdict, and I'm going to do the best that I can to make things better while my attorneys continue to pursue justice with the Court of Appeals. But my life is a lot more than about what this verdict says about me. In fact, I've been a hardworking American citizen since I was 10 years old. That's when my career started. I started by mowing lawns and trying to do the best that I could to improve landscapes for members of our community. And through that process, I developed a lot of skills on customer relations by knocking on doors and trying to solicit business, by doing the best that I can, recognizing that my work product was a reflection of my reputation and my character. That pathway led me to support myself all the way through college, where I earned eventually a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in industrial psychology. But my real passion was always in entrepreneurial ventures, and I built a number of businesses that I feel grateful to have provided jobs, paid taxes, and contributed to my community. Despite my serving this sentence in prison, I intend to continue living as a contributing citizen by teaching others in prison how they can work toward emerging with their dignity intact and with opportunities to earn a living. Sometimes it's not so easy to earn a living for somebody with a felony conviction. And that's why I reached out to a nonprofit and I began volunteering to develop these types of courses that we can get into distributions with more than 1 million people. And in time, I hope that I will be granted the earliest possible release date. And I think that community service will always be a part of my life. And I think I'll continue working as a volunteer with the nonprofit. I think too many people are serving sentences in American prisons, and we want to do more to help as many people as possible prepare for best possible outcomes. That's a pretty simple biography, right? And you could elaborate it, but that's just what I learned from listening to you today. So the next step would be to write a journal. So while you're in prison, you want to memorialize all the things that you are doing. And anybody who looks at my website can see what I say. what I tell them when I say I never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do. What I mean is, like, if you look at my at prisonvestors.org and you look at the founders page where I say I never ask anybody to do anything I'm not doing, you'll see a daily blog, and it's current as of yesterday, but I will finish it, write one today, because every day I memorialize how hard I am working to, well, my mission is to build more pathways to home confinement and work release programs. So, like, right up here you can see I go to founder, I go to daily blog, and you'll see every day there is a new journal every day. Why do I do this? Well, I got in the habit of doing this while I was in prison because I knew I'm going to sit across the table from a very cynical case manager, and I'm going to have to show them all the ways that I worked to prepare. If I show over here under influences, I would also write about the all the different people that influenced me along the journey from the time that I started my prison term until the time that I finished my prison term. And all of this is part of an effort to show, hey, this is what worked for me. This is what I think can work for you when you are building your pathway to um, argue for a higher level of liberty. So here also, you will see another component of it is, besides writing a daily journal, it's doing a book review. Every time you read a book, write about what you're reading. What are you learning from what you're reading? And I set goals. So, like, at the beginning of this year, I said, okay, I'm going to read 25 books in the year 2025. And every time I read a book, I'm going to write a book report. And I could just sit there and look at the book report. Okay, well, so there's a book report. So in the book reports, I always write about, why did I read the book? What did I learn from reading the book? And what ways will reading the book accelerate my path to success? So I just answer those simple questions because I knew that when I'm meeting with somebody that could maybe give me a job or sponsor our nonprofit or do something or be a part of it, I want to show them what I have done. And so this is where I record everything. So anybody can see it. But there's more. I want to make sure that I'm recording my commitment to fitness, my commitment to finance, my commitment to how do I earn a living. I say that nobody pays me for anything. It's because I show how do I earn a living using the stock market or using crypto or whatever I am doing, right? Everything I do is totally transparent. And that is how I persuade people to believe in me, because I want to teach other people. And Thomas is going to be working with me in designing a MasterClass that we will deliver to thousands of people in prison. And then the last component of that Prison Investors Talent Profile is a release plan. Thomas spoke about that. I'm going to build a release plan, and I'm going to talk about all the different reasons that I'm a great candidate for the earliest possibility of release. But I want you to do something else, Thomas, because I know you're a well-educated man and a leader while you're in prison. Use this tool to help people around you. Show them that do the same thing that I'm doing. Say, I'm never going to ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do. And so you start building this plan, but teach other people to do it. And that is the way that we strive to be the change we want to see in the world. In fact, one of the reasons that I'm going to ask you to do that, because as a member of our nonprofit community, you have the same vested interest that I have in seeing we've got to change our nation's prison system and create more mechanisms that divert people from prison rather than locking people up. As the CEO of your life, you got to focus on the result that we want. The prison system focuses on the process. Let's just lock somebody in a cage. But that's not the result we want. We want law-abiding, contributing citizens. And that's the reason that I invest so much time and energy in building a path like this. And I'm hopeful that you will not only write your talent profile, but you'll teach other people once you get there how to do the same. And our nonprofit will provide you with all the resources to use so that you could teach people. But the cool thing about this, Thomas, is we're now gamifying the system. So what does that mean? Every time you write something for your talent profile, you're going to get a point. But if you teach a class and you've got 10 guys there that are going through the thing and they open a profile, they're gonna get a point and you're also gonna get a point. Every time they add, they're gonna get a point, but you're gonna get a point. And if they become ambassadors of the system and share it with others, the points will continue to grow because the objective, it doesn't have a cap. It's earn as many points as you can. And then what I'm doing with this information, because it's all public and transparent, is I'm going and trying to raise resources from corporations that show, look at how many people are demonstrating they want to live as law-abiding citizens, and create pathways for them for us to provide, for our nonprofit, provide scholarships or micro loans for people who want to start a business, or grants, or maybe it qualifies them to get a job. And if you build a body of work that shows that, that's how we advocate to get you the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. Does that make sense?
Very much.
That's what we're going to build together in the lesson that we're going to write. And so we're almost out of time because I only have an hour and all these courses I've already been on 55 minutes. But I think we could really develop this in the lesson plan that I'm going to write based on your story. And then we'll use that as a tool that you could use to teach others while you're in prison.
I'm excited about it. It's funny. Nobody wants to go through this process. I'm more excited about helping other people than I am worried about what's happening to me. I get motivated about it.
And a lot of people go in with that mindset. They just don't have the framework or the structure. And that's what our nonprofit really strives to create, is that framework and structure. And I need to get ambassadors who are helping us teach and change, memorialize it. And that's what I use when I work with the Bureau of Prisons. Said we need to expand First Step Act and remove limitations and build more pathways. But that's my strategy. And anybody can do it, right? This should be free to anybody. And thanks to our sponsors, like White Collar Advice or other people that believe in the mission that sponsor it, we're able to give everything away for free. So nobody has to pay a penny. It's just super exciting. And I'm really glad that you're a part of the community.
Likewise. I can't help, as I listen to that and I think about guys that are in prison thinking, how am I going to come out of here? How am I going to have a job? I think so many of them, they don't have this foundation of self-worth. And in this process, since I was indicted, I got certified as a life coach. And I've taken people pro bono that I just see or encounter in life that I know that they're struggling through something, because I think there's so much that can be done to help people feel this self-worth that will propel them to actually succeed at whatever job they do or service they do. Because if you believe in yourself, you're going to do good. But if you believe you're worthless, you attract poor decisions and those kind of things. So,
well, I hope that you will use the course that we're offering because it's totally free. It provides that framework and it really structures it around the prison experience, where I'm always saying, I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do and that I'm not still doing. You can see it. And you too will be able to do that because we're going to have your lesson that you can teach from your life. And I look forward to collaborating with you to build it.
thank you. Have a great day.